Imagine being torn from everything you love as a child and handed directly to your most dangerous enemies. He was only 11 years old when his own father betrayed him and sold his future for power. He was forced to live among those who hated him, watching their every move and secretly planning revenge. When he finally came home after years in captivity, the stunned world would learn a name never forgotten. This is the real and terrifying story of Vlad III, the most feared prince who ever lived. He was so feared that enemies trembled at just his name before his armies ever crossed the border. His story begins not in triumph or glory, but in chains shaped by suffering, betrayal, and utter darkness. By the end of this story, you will finally understand why history never forgot him and never will. The 15th century was an age of blood and iron where borders meant nothing and life meant less. Massive empires collided like tectonic plates across all of Eastern Europe, crushing every small kingdom caught between them. The Ottoman Empire was expanding relentlessly, powerful, hungry, and utterly merciless toward every nation that refused to submit. The Kingdom of Hungary pressed southward from the north, equally dangerous and demanding absolute loyalty from all kingdoms. Caught between these two giants was a tiny land called Wallachia, beautiful, brutal, and barely surviving each year. In Wallachia, princes rose and fell like the seasons, killed by rivals, betrayed by allies, forgotten by mourning. In this brutal world, weakness was an instant death sentence, and cruelty was the only language anyone understood. Into this merciless and unforgiving world, in the year 1431, a boy named Vlad was born. His father was Vlad II, a prince who wore loyalty like a cloak, disposable and interchangeable always. His father joined the Order of the Dragon, a secret order sworn to fight and resist Ottoman expansion. When Ottoman power became impossible to resist, Vlad's own father made a terrible choice that destroyed his sons. He offered something more valuable than gold to the Ottoman Sultan. He offered his own flesh and blood. In 1442, young Vlad and his brother Radu were handed over to the Ottoman Sultan forever. His father rode away without looking back, and that moment carved something permanent and cold into Vlad's soul. He was a hostage, a living guarantee that his father would obey the Sultan's every command without question. A child had been sacrificed on the altar of politics, and he would never forget or forgive anyone. The Ottoman court was magnificent on the surface, but for young Vlad it was a gilded cage only. He received education, training, and comfort, yet was always reminded he could be executed at any given moment. Ottoman officials watched his every single move, reported his every word, and controlled his every thought without mercy. He mastered the Ottoman language perfectly, not out of admiration, but because knowledge was his only real weapon. He witnessed brutal punishments and public executions regularly, designed specifically to make entire populations submit through overwhelming terror. He saw clearly how just one single terrible act could control thousands of people, effortlessly, an eternal lesson. Every brutal punishment he witnessed became a lesson, and every act of cruelty he memorized with perfect clarity. He trained with Ottoman soldiers, learning not just combat and strategy, but the deep psychology of absolute dominance. Inside the boy, something was breaking forever, and something far darker and more dangerous was already replacing it. His younger brother Radu slowly adapted and even befriended the Sultan's son, but Vlad refused to ever bend. Where Radu found comfort, Vlad found cold fury, seeing every single person around him as a future enemy. 6 brutal years passed, and he transformed from a terrified child into something the world had never seen. By 17, Vlad understood something most rulers never learn. Fear is more powerful than love or loyalty itself. He was a prisoner in body alone. In his mind, he was already studying and mastering absolute power. He studied every ruler, every tyrant, every conqueror in history, always asking how they controlled everything around them. The answer was always the same: make the consequences of disobedience so terrible that nobody dares to resist. He had watched the Ottomans use psychological terror for years, and now he was ready to perfect it. His captivity had done something extraordinary. It had transformed an innocent young prince into an unexpected historical weapon. He planned to return to Wallachia, claim the throne by force, and make every single enemy pay dearly. Before he could escape captivity, fate delivered a devastating blow that hardened him beyond all recognizable human limits. In 1447, his father was assassinated and his older brother was buried alive by his enemies. The boy who might have one day healed received his final wound. From that moment, no mercy remained. In 1448, 17-year-old Vlad escaped Ottoman custody and made his bold and desperate move for power. He seized the Wallachian throne for the first time, but held it for only 2 short, terrifying months. Driven into exile, he disappeared completely into the shadows, waiting, planning and learning in absolute and total silence. He found a vital ally in John Hunyadi of Hungary and used that powerful alliance, brilliantly without sentiment. Every campaign Vlad led against the Ottomans brilliantly combined superior, tactical military genius with cold, calculated, devastating brutality. For years, political chaos swirled violently through Wallachia, as rulers rose and fell in rapid and bloody succession. Every day in exile was a lesson. Every enemy who underestimated him added fuel to his coming fire. In 1456, the perfect moment arrived. Wallachia was vulnerable. The throne was empty, and Vlad moved. This time there was no hesitation, no naivety, and no mercy. He had waited too long for waste. He finally took the throne, and the world would soon discover exactly how different this return truly was. The first thing Vlad did was make clear that the old rules were permanently gone, with no exceptions. Wallachia was plagued by corrupt, noble boyars, powerful men who had always betrayed their princes for personal profit. These were the men who murdered his father and buried his own older brother alive in the ground. Vlad invited them all to a grand feast, and they all came dressed in their absolute finest clothes. Instead of food, they found soldiers. Instead of wine, they found chains. Instead of theater, they found judgment. Those who had betrayed Wallachia were taken outside, and what happened next established the terrible Vlad legend forever. His chosen method maximized suffering and visibility, but most importantly, its devastating psychological impact on every single witness. He impaled his enemies alive on long sharpened wooden stakes, giving himself the name that history remembers forever. This was not mindless cruelty. It was calculated psychological theater, a message written in blood across the sky. The message was brutally simple and impossible to misunderstand. Betray Vlad III and this terrible fate follows. Corrupt merchants who cheated the poor now suddenly faced consequences no previous Wallachian ruler had ever dared enforce. Thieves disappeared from Wallachian streets almost overnight. Crime collapsed completely because its terrible cost had become utterly absolute. He placed a golden cup at a public fountain, testing if anyone dared steal it, and nobody did. The people were terrified. Yes, but safer from criminals than they had ever been in their entire lives. He was not simply a monster, he was the most brutally effective ruler that Wallachia had ever seen. Stories spreading across Europe about Vlad were so extreme that even hardened veteran soldiers refused to believe them. Ambassadors sent to his court reported scenes that turned their hair white and haunted their nightmares for years. When Ottoman ambassadors arrogantly refused to remove their turbans in his presence, Vlad already had a shocking solution. He ordered their turbans nailed permanently to their heads, solving the problem of disrespect in his court forever. When 2 Catholic monks arrived with a message criticizing his methods, Vlad responded with his characteristic dark precision. He asked each monk which fate was holier, to die impaled or to die quickly by another means. The monk who chose impalement was immediately answered. The other received only the dark mercy of something quicker. Sultan Mehmed II, the great conqueror of mighty Constantinople, personally led his enormous army directly against Wallachia. The Sultan expected the small kingdom to fold immediately. Instead, he found something that stopped him stone cold. Vlad had arranged 20,000 impaled prisoners outside his capital, a nightmarish forest of absolute terror and consequence. Historians record that Mehmed was visibly shaken. He who conquered the greatest city on earth trembled before Vlad. The Sultan told his generals he could not conquer a land belonging to a man beyond all reason. The world's most powerful military force turned back. Vlad had completely defeated them using nothing but pure terror. No army could truly defeat him, because he fought on a battlefield no military force could ever reach. He invented what we would today call psychological warfare, using the enemy's own terrified mind as his battlefield. Every campaign Vlad led against the Ottomans brilliantly combined superior tactical military genius with cold, calculated, devastating brutality. He struck at night, in harsh winter, in disguise, always refusing to fight on any enemy's own terms. He led a daring raid directly into the Sultan's encampment at night, nearly killing Mehmed himself while sleeping. He never commanded the largest army, but he had the smartest strategy and enemies made reckless by fear. He poisoned wells, burned all crops, and deliberately drove plague-infected cattle into Ottoman supply lines with merciless efficiency. He made Wallachia itself a weapon, transforming the entire land into a machine that slowly consumed all invaders. Even as he fought the mighty Ottomans, his own brother Radu turned against him and led Ottoman forces. Even his Hungarian ally, King Matthew, eventually had him arrested. No ruler could comfortably control or ignore Vlad. Even imprisoned, Vlad dominated every space around him. Jailers feared their prisoner more than the outside world itself. Reports claim he impaled mice and small animals in prison, keeping his disturbed mind and dark habits sharp. Every king who imprisoned him eventually realized it was simply far safer to make Vlad their ally instead. He married into the Hungarian royal family and converted to Catholicism, every single move coldly and perfectly calculated. After years of imprisonment and exile, Vlad finally made his one last desperate attempt to reclaim the throne. In 1476, he recaptured the Wallachian throne for a third and final time. Fighting with ferocity, he held power for only a few desperate weeks before fate finally caught him on a December battlefield. The exact circumstances of his death remain a dark mystery that historians have debated for 5 full centuries. Some say he was killed by his own men. Others believe a single Ottoman assassin finally caught him. His head was sent to Constantinople for public display, proof to the world the nightmare had finally ended. Was the nightmare truly over? The stories spread, the legend grew, and his fear outlived him by centuries. German pamphlets, Russian chronicles, Ottoman histories, every culture had its own, uniquely terrifying version of the monster prince. Then, in 1897, Irish author Bram Stoker gave the world an immortal vampire called Count Dracula. Stoker based his immortal vampire villain on the real Vlad III, giving the world a monster forever. But here is the question history cannot fully answer. Was Vlad the Impaler a monster or a survivor? A child torn from his family, raised by enemies, shaped by cruelty. Can we blame what he became? In Romania today, Vlad is celebrated as a proud national hero who kept Wallachia free from Ottoman conquest. The rest of the world simply knows him as Dracula, the most famous monster in all of fiction. History is never simple. The most terrifying monsters often begin as the world's most forgotten and vulnerable victims.